How did majority of the world going from looking like this to this within just 100 years or so? That, my friend, would be down to something called eugenics. Francis Galton, an English statistician, demographer, ethnologist, and genocidal maniac, as I would particularly call him, and also a cousin of Charles Darwin, coined the term eugenics in 1883. He defined eugenics as the study of how society can make future generations better or worse in terms of their physical and mental qualities. Galton thought things like health, disease, and personality traits were mostly determined by a person's family background and race. During the late 19th century, discussions of human improvement and the emergence of scientific racism gained momentum. Experts of the time classified individuals and groups as superior and inferior based on biological and behavioral traits. This way of thinking led to putting individuals, groups, and even entire nations into a hierarchy based on these ideas. This was great propaganda for the media, and people generally believed they were doing good for the world, as that's what they were brainwashed to believe by the newspapers and those around them.
There was that kind of naive, optimistic vision of eugenics, like, hey, let's all get together and make better people.
The eugenics movement was about having healthy children, about having a stronger society. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to look at the underbelly of what was implemented in the name of eugenics to see what was so problematic about it.
Women were forcefully sterilized. Entire categories of people were classed unfit for reproduction, including immigrants, people of color, and disabled people. Eugenics even inspired the whole Nazi movement. Meanwhile, their ideal genetic standard reflected the movement's members, who were made up of people who looked like this. So when I get very ignorant comments and people are asking me, so if the world was so black, where did they all go? Where did all the black people go then? Well, this, eugenics, played a major factor in that. They literally bred out the black. See, this is one of the many roots of racism, discrimination, and stereotypes towards people of color and towards people with disabilities. And it will continue to affect us until people realize that some scientific claims just aren't real and are made up to suit the victors of the new world that we live in. And even if the eugenics movement didn't make it to your country, the idea behind it definitely did. It's affected the way that we view one another, especially how some non-people of color view people of color. This whole eugenics movement was the epitome of white supremacy. And I'd like to end this video with an article I found about breeding out the black blood in Australia. So this article was made in 1934. The headline was "Breeding Out Black Blood, Scientists' Views on Perth Doctor's Suggestions, Intermarriage Question." Dr. Cyril Bryan of Western Australia says steps should be taken to reduce the half-caste population of the state by scientifically breeding out the black blood by marrying them to persons with a greater proportion of white blood. Here it says that Professor T. Harvey Johnson, during his 5 trips to Australia, has taken blood tests from hundreds of natives and said that the blood characteristics of the Australian Aborigines were much more closely related to those of a white race than they were of those of any other race. He then goes on to say he has seen children of mixed blood in Central Australia who could pass for white children in Adelaide, but because they had a trace of blood in them, they were classed as natives. The dilution of Aboriginal blood by intermarriage with whites could go right on, and it could probably be swamped much more readily than that of the Negro. There were some characteristics of the Negro, such as the crinkly hair and certain facial features, which it was very hard to breed out. Australian Aborigines, on the other hand, have softer, wavier hair, more akin in texture to those of the Europeans. In the East Indies, where one finds a mixture of Dutch and Malay blood, all those persons with a trace of white blood in them are classed as white. He added that Portuguese adopted the same principle in India and Africa, but the British communities work on different lines. We class anyone with a trace of dark blood in them as black. As you can see, this was happening worldwide. And that last paragraph of the article had me thinking about the 1790 US Census Act. and how people were falsely identified in the records, but that's a whole other topic for a whole other video. Follow for part 2, where I'll be going into how the eugenics movement practically wiped out the majority of the Aboriginal people of Australia. Thank you for watching, guys. Bye.